Ah, Mother Nature is a cruel mistress, but also has a wicked sense of humour. There's a very narrow band in which wind power actually works at all. Obviously, when there's no wind, which happens quite a lot in winter, the turbines are becalmed and stationary, and you get zero electricity. But also, when the wind is too strong, you have to apply the brakes to the turbines and shut them down. Otherwise, they will spin out of control and destroy themselves. It's always a fun spectacle when that happens. And once again, you get precisely zero electricity. And the wind turbine operators get paid to turn them off when they're generating too much electricity. No, seriously, I'm not joking. They're called constraint payments. The idea of trying to use the weather to run an electricity grid would have been laughed at by engineers a century ago. Having to deal with the randomness of wind speeds, connect all the thousands of turbines which may be spaced kilometres apart with a tangle of cabling, and then convert it to usable electricity that the grid can actually cope with. But now it's mainstream energy policy in most of the world. And in the UK, they've experienced both ends of the wind energy spectrum in the past few days, both of which have resulted in the majority of wind turbines producing zero electricity. Progress. Welcome back to MGUY, British engineer and lawyer, now Sydney YouTuber. Thanks to everyone who's helped this channel get to 100k subscribers. I'm incredibly grateful. Thank you so much to everyone who's watched. But if you're still one of the majority of my viewers who are not subscribed, you should still just click that subscribe button down below so you don't miss out on any future videos. And if you'd like to make a contribution to the channel, why not buy me a coffee? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. So a few days ago, the UK was covered by the phenomenon known as a dunkelflaute, from the German meaning dark wind lull, and it's exactly what it says. Not only is it dull and overcast, meaning barely any solar generation, but it's dead calm, meaning no wind generation either. And these conditions can last for days, if not weeks, meaning a vast chunk of generation assets are producing precisely zero electricity. Wind power collapses to less than 1% of UK energy. Calm weather leaves Britain highly reliant on ageing fleet of gas-fired power stations. Wind power has collapsed to less than 1% of Britain's supply, as some of the stillest weather in years hits the UK and Europe. They'll probably say it's all climate change. The dunkelflaute spell sent winter wind farm output to what is thought to be its lowest since 2015, when there were far fewer turbines. Near zero wind speeds and low temperatures have left the UK dependent on France, Norway, Belgium and Denmark to keep the lights on through much of today, with the countries collectively supplying more than 10% of the UK's electricity through undersea cables. It follows Tuesday's attack on wind farms by Donald Trump, who halted developments in US waters and called the turbines inefficient, ugly and a threat to wildlife. The lack of wind also left Britain highly reliant on its ageing fleet of gas-fired power stations, which were providing over 60% of its electricity. It meant that the National Energy System Operator, NESO, had to call in expensive extra capacity. At around noon on Wednesday, the Connors Quay 2 power station was offered £745 per megawatt hour to start generating. The normal price of power is around £100. The extra cost of that power will eventually find their way onto consumer bills. Of course it will. And before they'd even got over that, Mother Nature blew in a deep Atlantic depression, which they now insist on calling storms and giving them names because it's scary, meaning that suddenly the wind turbines that were sitting idle just days ago had to be shut down because the wind was too strong. And guess what? The operators will still rake in millions of dollars as a result. Thousands of turbines to switch off for storm Eowyn because winds are too strong. Millions will be paid to operators in compensation for missed output. Thousands of wind turbines are to be switched off during storm Eowyn because the power generated by its 100 miles per hour gusts would overwhelm the UK's electricity grid. The extreme weather will generate an unusably large amount of energy when Eowyn hits wind farms in Scotland and the North Sea on Friday, forcing operators to disconnect their machines. The idle turbines are nonetheless expected to deliver millions of pounds of profits for wind farm operators, who will be able to claim so-called constraint payments for disconnecting them. Tom Smout, a senior analyst with the energy consultancy Aurora, said, "It's typical for Great Britain's grid infrastructure to be unable to handle the power generated during periods of strong wind. We expect many of Scotland's wind farms to be disconnected from the grid during the coming strong winds, even though the wind will be blowing strongly. However, the operators will still be getting paid because they have made their assets available." He added that the system in Britain means that the National Energy System operator pays turbine owners to stop them from generating. This money ultimately comes from bill payers. Of course it does. But this makes perfect sense in the befuddled brains of the net zero nutcases. We'll just build enormous batteries to store extra electricity, they say, not realising that there isn't enough copper or other raw materials on the planet to build the scale of these fantasy batteries required to keep the UK going for even a day, let alone a week. Those pioneers who built the reliable electricity grids of the past would be spinning in their graves at the stupidity of the current age and how we are naive enough to believe that the electricity demands of the 21st century can be met by windmills, solar panels and batteries that don't even exist and cannot even be built. One good thing though, we can breathe a sigh of relief that at least those pioneering engineers are not around to see for themselves our present-day collective insanity. It would be too much of an embarrassment to bear.